Welcome to KRA's The Hub, the official podcast of KRA Corporation. And now get ready to hear workforce topics and trends you need to know on the go.
Hello and welcome back to KRA's The Hub. This is Doug Foresta. Of course, Jonathan Overall is here, and we have a very special guest. Kyla Guyette, Director of Strategic Partnerships at KRA, is here to join us as well. Jonathan, Kyla, great to be with you both.
Same.
Thank you, Doug. It's always great to be with you, and welcome, Kyla, to the Hub. Welcome to KRA. We'll jump right into today's first question. Kyla, you've had an impressive career in workforce development. You've held various leadership roles. What initially drew you to this field, and how has your perspective on workforce development services evolved over the years?
Yeah, honestly, workforce development, I think like most people, found me instead of me finding it. I didn't know this was a job for most of my life. And then Hurricane Katrina came along and blew my town off the map. And I just wanted to help. What could I do? How could I have some kind of impact? And decided to start working. It was then called Katrina money, but it evolved into National Emergency Grant Funds. And honestly, never looked back because I loved the impact that you're able to have not only individually in folks' lives, because there's nothing more important than connecting an individual to a job, right? And a family to income and all of those things. But the collective impact that you can have on a community is something that over the years, I've really become invested in the larger scale work and the larger impact that I'm able to have.
Thank you so much. I actually only recently learned this, but you are currently on the board of NAWB, right? The National Association of Workforce Boards. And actually, as we record this, we're just about to head into the 2024 NAWB Forum. Talk to us a little bit about, your experience being on the board and, your contribution to, what is that like? What are you doing on the board? We'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, sure. I said when I got elected to the board, it was a major career milestone for me. I had not known much about this industry as a young worker, several years ago. And NAWB was really that place where I found a lot of learning and education about the larger landscape and how all of these things played together. So it was kind of my goal. One day I'm going to be on the board of directors. I'm going to have a seat at the table. And what I really love about it is the board gives us unfettered conversation. We really talk about the industry, how it is going, where it is, where we think we're going. And I appreciate the fact that there's a few of us that have had the experience of being a board director. So that's a really different perspective than some of the board members that may be coming from private industry or coming from higher education. And so we definitely are very vocal members of that team and fight every day a little bit for what it feels like every day on the ground for folks in this industry, what we're doing, how do we advocate for boards. That's not traditionally been an area where NAWB has had as much presence as I think it could and should have. So we've talked really strategically about how does NAWB really evolve itself into a powerful advocacy group for boards. As we talk about reauthorization, that's something that everybody has questions about. Lots of other groups have their voice on Capitol Hill where we are very varied. States will go and have their pitch, local boards would have their pitch, but we really need a unified kind of voice and stance for us. So that's something we're really working on. And also working through how do we really be a value add for our local members, because I care about, most importantly, the local boards that we represent. More than any other partner, that's who I'm there fighting and advocating for, and making sure that when we say we're the National Association of Workforce Boards, that's who our customer is, and we're making sure that they're getting everything that we can give to them. And I'm so glad that we're having our annual biggest party of the year in Washington.
That's right. I'm sure you will hit the Hill at some point, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I never miss an opportunity.
That's great.
Kyla, thank you for that insight and background on not only what NAWB is about, what it stands for, but your role. One of the questions we like to ask influencers within workforce development is to really begin to look ahead. And from your perspective, what do you believe are some of the most significant challenges that are facing the workforce development sector? And more specifically, how can organizations like KRA and NAWB work together to address those issues?
Yeah, that's something we talk about. I think I talk about it in my life almost every day, right? We're all trying to predict what's around the corner. And I think a couple of things rise to the top in every conversation. It's usually, how do you do more with less? We all know that the traditional WIOA funding is going down a little bit every year, but I don't really see it as a funding loss. It's just a search for where the funding is, because now there's such a broad range of institutions that are funding workforce development projects and workforce development work, whether that's the Department of Commerce, that is, the National Science Foundation, that is private industry. All of these places were not traditionally where we got our funding from. And so we got into this box of how do we serve based on DOL and WIOA regulations. And I think the diversified funding blast open the doors for us to really be impactful and see the system in a different way. I also think that if we are not moving at the speed of business, we will soon become irrelevant as the workforce boards of the world and those that are providing services to them. So we've got to figure out how to move with the times a lot more quickly, or we'll be replaced. There's the rise of other competitors in the space, not just from service providers, but from your public institutions, your post-secondary institutions. Everybody wants to do workforce right now. And there's an opportunity for all of those non-traditional providers to get into the space. So we really have to figure out, how do we align ecosystems? I really believe that's where the workforce board's primary role happens to be, is aligning an ecosystem locally, and we come in as service providers and fulfill that mission, right? And make sure that that happens. But we also want to make sure that we're doing it utilizing all the technology that's at our fingertips right now. We talk about do more with less. Well, we have AI to do the triage of customers in our one-stops. We have the ability to do a lot of those automated processes. We have, every day I get a new email from a new vendor that comes out with a new system, right? Case management systems, and how do we do virtual learning through VR headsets, and all of these things are very varied and come sporadically. So I think it's really about finding a cohesive balance and creating that ultimate ecosystem for folks where we are no open doors, no wrong door, right? You're coming in, you're very collective. We're welcoming all the partners in, but we are really doing it in a smart, technologically advanced way.
Thank you so much. So let's shift over now to talking about the labor market.
Sure.
We all know things were tight before COVID. Since COVID, they seem to be even more competitive. Talk about talent development, how you approach in-house talent development, and also obviously we've seen an increased focus on DEI and DEIB, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Talk about how do you approach those things in what still is a very competitive labor market?
Yeah, absolutely. I talk to all the time to board members and to other folks that don't do this for a living, and they talk about low unemployment rates. We should be having less dollars, right? Because we have low unemployment rates. And I actually talk about the customers that we serve are traditionally higher barrier individuals that take longer to outcome when unemployment is low, i.e. those folks that can get a job easily on their own are doing so without coming into the public workforce system. So the toll that tends to take on our service providers, those folks that are showing up to the AJCs every day and working with customers, it tends to be a very taxing environment. So really talking a lot about self-care. How do we talk through a little bit of mental health? I think that's something that we've been lacking for a really long time for participants as well as for staff. Really, how does that impact the way that we provide services? We always are trying to be so competitive. We live in this really competitive world where it's often seen as great to work 10 hours a day and have 200 folks on your caseload and juggle it all, but having to have those conversations with folks about taking care of themselves. And work-life balance has become such a norm for us now. And it's hard to think back 4 years ago, right? Before that was such a part of our lexicon, the part of the conversation, that was like a luxury work-life balance. But the folks that we have working for us really are needing and demanding that work-life balance. And the more that we can help them live a more robust, fulfilling outside of work, the better that work becomes inside the 9 to 5 or whatever the work hours happen to be, because those are also flexible these days too. And I will say the biggest compliment, one of the compliments that I've received from somebody that worked for me a couple of years ago was not only did I let her have a seat at the table, I pulled up the chair and made sure she was comfy. And that for me is very important when we talk about the belonging piece. Everybody talks about all of the letters and we keep adding, but for me, the B is probably the best addition that we've made to the DEI conversation, because we can open doors all we want and say, check the box, we've made it open for you, right? But really helping folks to feel included and belonging to the process is, I think, where we can have the biggest impact. For frontline staff, for individuals that we serve, for customers, for all of us, because the best ideas come from robust conversation. Nobody has the best ideas in a silo. I definitely know I don't. It's from talking and bouncing ideas off of each other, from increasing your perspective and making sure that you have a well-rounded perspective. And so for me, the belonging piece has been long missing in all of our DEI work. And I'm glad of the work that we're doing with KRA to talk about that now, and anything that we can do to help our customers, our staff really feel important in this process.
Yeah, just real quick, what came to my mind as you said that was the way I've heard it described is, DEI is sort of getting invited to the dance. And then belonging is being asked to dance once you're at the dance.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's great. I think it's a perfect segue, even as we close out this session today, talking about this month, which is March, and it's Women's History Month. And not only we're celebrating the achievements of women in various fields of the workforce, but for you, Kyla, as a woman in leadership, what challenges have you faced in your career, and how have you been able to overcome them?
Yeah, it's been quite an interesting ride for myself. I started in this business being a project director at, I believe, 24 years old. And so at that point, I was the youngest kid in the room everywhere. And so led from a sense of myself kind of drowning, trying to provide leadership, and that leadership that it was acceptable. You kind of want people to be afraid of you, right? Like you demand because you have to, especially as a woman and a young woman in this field, in a field that was dominated by men. You have the sense of needing to prove yourself, prove that you're tough enough to deal with customers, prove that you were tough enough to do budget conversations and all of those things. And as I've grown over the years and have encountered more challenges than I could ever have imagined in this space, I now reflect on a place of, I love what I do. I want to inspire everyone around me. I want to make sure I take all of the lessons from maybe all of the bosses I thought I never wanted to be like, and wrap it into how can I be the most nurturing to folks. It is always great to me when somebody leaves me because they go on to a better opportunity. I tend to tell people I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. Who's going to run this place, right? I need to grow leaders. And so it really makes me excited. And I feel like that has become my place in workforce development, rather than I'm a little bit getting past that hump of wanting to be the one, the superstar, right? And now it's about growing the next generation of folks who really can take the baton and continue to do this really important work. I've gone from meeting performance measures and talking about just meeting budget expectations to really now being deeply rooted in equitable opportunity. And how do I create those kind of pipelines? How do I transform systems? I think my vision and confidence in the ability to do those things has grown over the 20 years that I've been in this business. And it's funny, my husband has said to me, why do you always feel like you have to do everything and change the world? And quite honestly, I said, Well, it never occurred to me that I couldn't. So I just do. And that's the part that I feel like is the next chapter of my career.
Kyla, this was a great conversation today. It had so much insightful nuggets for our audience and those that are out there, and your journey in workforce development. And I love those words that there's nothing that you can't do. And I think if we take that into the approach of the work that we do, that we can accomplish a lot individually, but also collectively as a system. So thank you for sharing. How can people learn more about what you do and some of the projects that you're working on currently?
Sure. I am on all of the channels, right? All of the social channels. I'm most active on LinkedIn for my business profile, but I also on Twitter at hashtag Kyla Guyette. And so follow me. I like to talk about workforce all the time. So you can have lots of insight into that, but also all of the KRA channels. I am excited to be part of the team and lead us into the next generation of what we're going to do. So keep on following KRA, keep on following me, and let's see where we can take it.
Well, thank you, Kyla. And Doug, it's always great. Look forward to seeing both of you at NAWB coming up here very soon.
Yes.
See you guys real soon.
Thank you for listening to KRA's The Hub. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. To learn more about KRA Corporation, visit www.kra.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back soon with a new episode.